I'm Caroline Hyde. This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, IBM revenue sinks for 20 straight quarters, dragging the stock lower. We'll dig into Big Blue's results. Plus, the iPhone is getting an overhaul just in time for its 10th birthday. The high-end features on the new model. And we bring you the latest from Facebook's F8 conference, including CEO Mark Zuckerberg's big plans for augmented reality. First to our lead, IBM reports its first quarter results and revenue fell for a 20th straight quarter, down more than 2% to $18.2 billion. This is just under expectations, and meanwhile, gross margins also trailed analyst predictions. As a result, shares trading lower after hours. You can type in GIPO into your Bloomberg, and you'll see that we're down some 3.9% in after-hours trading. That's wiping off at more than $5 billion of the market cap, if you're thinking it's a $160 billion market value for IBM. So let's get a little bit more analysis for you. Anurag Rana covers IBM for Bloomberg Intelligence and joins us now with more reaction. And I mean, is there any upside here? We've seen revenue falling, gross profit margin falling as well. Any rays of light around amidst the clouds?
Yeah, Caroline, the few things that I would point out would be that pre-tax margin actually went up quite a bit, and that's due to severe cutting off SG&A. So that's something to talk about positively.
SG&A just...
Sales, general and administrative expenses. So there's a lot of headcount reduction over there, which has led to some, PTI pre-tax profit expansion. The other thing is they are maintaining guidance of non-GAAP EPS for the full year. So that's something to look forward to. The thing that I'd be listening to on the call would be to understand the difference why the gross margins declined by such a big amount between last year and this year, and what the difference would be, going forward.
I know if we're just digging into some of those margins, it was quite a significant fall, wasn't it, overall? And we're seeing them down to 44.5%, down from 46.9%. So we're looking into those sorts of things. But there is still the ray of light of where the growth is eventually going to be coming from. They've been talking up their cloud part of the business, and in fact we saw revenues there climb some 35%. It's not enough, of course, to stabilize the overall ship, but they are seeming to be making the right investments in the new growth areas.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at both the cloud numbers as well as some of the other areas, you are seeing revenue growth over there. But as we talked about it several quarters in a row now, the legacy businesses are the ones that are declining, and it's not enough to offset. The cloud growth is not enough to offset the declines in the legacy businesses, and it will take some time before it lopsides, where you see the cloud businesses and the analytics will take over the decline in some of the legacy businesses.
Can you update us on the jobs perspective of IBM? Because, of course, this was a company that came out and sat alongside Donald Trump and said, we're going to be hiring all the time. We did our research, and it seemed that they had been making some significant layoffs. I'm typing in the loss function into the Bloomberg. In October, they laid off 600 people in Germany. What are we seeing in terms of employment at IBM?
As I said, cost cutting has been one of the big reasons why pre-tax profit actually increased this time across most of their divisions. So we will be talking, or we'll be listening it on the call and trying to figure out if they are hiring in certain areas, whether it's in the area of Watson, artificial intelligence, cloud, and in the area where there is no growth, either, they are laying off some people over there.
And lastly, I just wanted to ask about perhaps the core operating expenditures. Where else could be cut down? Because Credit Suisse have been saying the only way IBM can ever make its earnings per share forecast that they're going forward is by reducing core operating expenditures significantly. Apart from layoffs, where else could they be reining in their expenditures?
Well, layoffs is the big expense item, because R&D as a percentage of revenue is still healthy. It has been even compared to both the years. So it is really the cost cutting through employee cost, and again, large portion of that is in the legacy businesses where there isn't much growth, and they are scaling back on that.
Overall, Anurag, therefore, where do you see this stock price going, this company going? Are you relatively glass half full, glass half empty? Because the share price reaction after hours shows that many are disappointed.
I think we would want to understand a little bit once again that what was the reason for such a sharp decline in gross margins, whether this is just a product mix or simply a function of that the newer products don't have such a high margin and they are growing at a much faster rate compared to legacy software businesses which were higher margin in business, which were high margin in nature. And as time goes along, whether they scale up and able to improve their margin structure. So I think that's one of the core reasons. The revenue shortfall was just about 1% more than what the street was expecting, but the EPS, there was an EPS beat. So I don't think the shortfall in revenue had that big of a deal, but I think it's the gross margin that we would want to know more about.
Certainly, we'll see whether those questions are answered on the call. We'll be keeping our viewers up to date throughout the show. Bloomberg's Anurag Rana, thank you very much indeed for all your insights. Now, in funding round news for you, Silver Lake has amassed the largest ever technology-focused private equity fund, raising about $15 billion in roughly 4 months. Now, according to people familiar with the matter, the initial target was $12.5 billion. Silver Lake now manages about $39 billion in total. Coming up, 10 years after Steve Jobs held up the original iPhone, Apple readies for an iPhone overhaul. We've got the details with this Bloomberg scoop next. This is Bloomberg.
Johnny, do you have anything to say on the first phone call?
It's not too shabby, is it?
It's not too shabby.
History was made, Steve Jobs making the first call on the iPhone to Apple's chief design officer, Johnny Ive, back in 2007. Yes, the iPhone actually turns 10 years old. Does it make you feel old? And in a Bloomberg scoop, we've learned Apple is celebrating with its most extensive iPhone lineup to date. In addition to upgrading the current models, Apple is said to be testing a completely revamped iPhone with an all-screen front, curved glass, and a stainless steel frame. Bloomberg technology reporter Mark Gurman broke the story for us and joins us along with Bloomberg Gadfly economist Shira Ovide, joining us from Facebook's F8 conference in San Jose. Welcome to the show, both of you. Mark, first of all, talk to us about what we're expecting with these new products.
Like you said, it's going to be a big upgrade for the iPhone. This is going to be the first time where they're coming out with 3 all-new models. So right now they have the iPhone 7 and iPhone 7 Plus. They're going to upgrade those with faster processors and some other new bells and whistles. But the main entree is going to be this overhauled iPhone that's called the iPhone 8. It's going to have a stainless steel frame, curved glass, and the new part here is that the phone has very slim bezels, sort of like the Samsung S8 on all sides. So they'll be able to pack in a slightly larger screen, but into an overall sized phone that's about the same size as the smaller iPhone 7.
So we're looking at new bells and whistles, as Mark calls it. Shira, talk to us about how this affects the supply chain. We're just saying how perhaps it looks like the Galaxy S8, and potentially Samsung might be benefiting in some ways from the supply chain here.
Yeah, this is a really interesting moment in the friend and enemy relationship between Apple and Samsung. These two companies, they obviously fiercely compete in the high-end smartphone market with Samsung's own line of phones versus the iPhone. But Samsung is also a very important supplier to Apple, that it makes things like computer chips and screens and memory. And over the years, Apple has tried to reduce its reliance on buying parts from Samsung, but it doesn't always work. And in the case of the fancy new screen on the new iPhone, as Mark reported, right, Apple is going to need to rely on Samsung to supply these displays. It's a little bit of an awkward dependence for Apple.
Frenemy continues, and Mark, the actual specifications is going to be so high-end that potentially we're not going to be able to get our mitts on these particular phones in quite the same pace as we're used to.
Right, and to Shira's point, this new phone will use that OLED display. It shows colors a little bit better. The Samsung phones have had it for quite some time, but they're very supply constrained right now, and we reported on this about 6 months ago with our colleagues in Asia. The phone's OLED displays are in high demand, and only Samsung Display, Samsung's component arm, is able to produce these right now. In the future, LG, Sharp, Japan Display will get to it. But right now, it's only Samsung. And to Shira's point, that makes Apple reliant on an arm of Samsung's bigger business, but also it keeps constraints high for the time being.
And Shira, it comes in an interesting time when we've seen actually a lot of pressure being put on suppliers of Apple, whether it be particularly in the chips area. I'm thinking of Imagination Technology in the United Kingdom. Do suppliers have something to concern with Apple because they can be made or broken by this juggernaut?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is a little bit ironic that we're used to these kind of smaller companies falling victim to pressures from Apple. You know, that one case several years ago when there was a graphite supplier that went bankrupt after it was kind of tying its entire business to getting business from the iPhone. And now we've seen the tables turn a little bit, right? Where you have Apple reliant on a company like Samsung that is just as powerful as Apple is.
And just talk to us, Mark, about how important this particular launch is, because it's a decade old, but we've also got such pressure coming from Samsung because it really rose the bar. We saw you playing with the S8 and you liked it. It's a good quality piece of equipment.
Right, we're at an inflection point, so it's important for a couple of reasons. First, we're at a point where people are looking for what goes beyond the smartphone. Apple still has to show the smartphone is the cream of the crop, the king of the consumer devices industry. To your other point, the Samsung S8, it's a high-end phone. It looks great, and they're getting to these new features, the OLED display, the higher-end cameras, the thinner bezels, the glass, 6 months before Apple will have its launch in the fall. So it comes at an important time, especially even after Apple retained the same overall form factor for 3 years in a row with the 6, 6S, and 7. So we'll see. As Gene Munster told me for our story, Apple's set up to hit a home run, so they better come through, and I think they will.
You think they will? And I certainly urge our viewers to go and check out your story, both of your stories, of course, on Bloomberg.com. That was great reporting from Bloomberg Technologies' Mark Gurman, who broke the story on the new features, and Gavri's Shira Ovide, who really shines a light on the supply chain. Thank you both for joining us. Now, sticking with Apple, the man who co-founded the world's most valuable company says, well, he's confident Apple will remain on top of the game for the next few decades. We sat down with Steve Wozniak and asked about the disruption technology causes and where he stands in the midst of it all.
Well, disruption doesn't necessarily mean on a big, wide scale, all jobs across a lot of disciplines. Disruption to me means a company comes across with a new idea, a new approach, and everybody says, oh my gosh, that's so good, that's the way of the future. And and a lot of companies get disrupted. They kind of get put out of business. That's what disruption means to me. You're talking about maybe, well, would human life the way we know it get disrupted? Every change of my entire life in technology has sort of changed how we live life. It's been very dramatic in the recent times, from personal computers to smartphones to the internet to high bandwidth mobile. It's been how we live, how we get the same things done has changed so much. So you could say that disrupted the ways of the old. Some people, we grew up with the old. We lament losing some of the things that were so precious to us, but the way I've always looked at change in technology from the time I decided to be an engineer when very young was that we create a new world that's different. We lose some things from the past, but it's not bad. It's just another form of good. Do I see humans being replaced and all the jobs and all that? It's way too early. Way too early to come to that sort of a horrible overall assessment. I think we have a pretty good employment level right now.
What about the Apple's role in the future and what products they will unveil? We're all expecting the iPhone 8. What sort of new features do you think will need to come from these products to be able to ensure that it remains the dominant smartphone force?
Yeah, I am not an expert on what Apple's going to have. I don't speak for Apple. I don't speak to what they're going to have. I've read as much as you, and you've probably read less than you about what the possibilities might be. Obviously, a huge company has to look to kind of stay huge and stay alive and keep going. Apple's done it by spotting new trends, making changes, being innovative, going in new directions. I'd like to see if Apple's going to be in something huge, a huge market like the self-driving cars that are coming, or even electric cars. What's Apple going to offer that's so different than everyone else that's going to be the leadership position? The iPhone said, hey, a phone doesn't need to have buttons. It can be a whole new smooth screen. And it took a while for the world to catch on, but walk into any phone store, that's what you see in all the smartphones now. So maybe Apple will be the first company to take some leap in self-driving cars, maybe the first car without a steering wheel, and eventually that will be the way for everyone.
Fascinating, because of course we've just seen Apple see the trials. It's got clearance for trials for autonomous technology. Are you an optimist about where indeed Apple and the big tech players will remain? You're talking about where the humanity will be in 60 years. Will we see Facebook, Google, and indeed Apple still the top most valuable companies in the world in that time, do you think?
No, there's always new things that you don't expect that come on that become these huge, huge entities that take our life, sometimes in a new direction. Apple, Google, Facebook, these kind of companies will still be very huge and large and ongoing, you know, with their existing names. They're just, the trouble is that you get to a certain point of wealth that 60 years is too soon a time that they could ever really disappear and go out of business. I mean, the only way Apple could go out of business is if it merged with Google and changed the name slightly. Just a joke.
He's just joking. That was Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak there. Now, a story we're watching. Volkswagen is gearing up to take on Tesla. Now, the German company is planning to roll out 4 affordable electric vehicles in the coming years. Volkswagen's Audi unit is also debuting an upscale battery-powered crossover it aims to introduce in 2019. This is a chance for Volkswagen to emerge from its diesel cheating scandal and comply with the tightening emission regulations across the globe. Now, coming up, President Trump has called the H-1B visa system a cheap labor program that takes jobs from Americans. Now he's taking actions to combat it. The president's latest moves ahead. And a feature we'd like to bring to your attention is our interactive TV function. You can find it at TV Go on the Bloomberg. You'll not only be able to watch us live, but also see previous interviews and dive into any of the securities or Bloomberg functions we talk about. And you can become part of the conversation by sending us instant messages during our shows. This is for Bloomberg subscribers only, though. Check it out at TV Go. This is Bloomberg. Now, President Trump is taking action on the H-1B visa program, one widely used by the tech industry. Speaking in Wisconsin Tuesday, Trump railed against the program.
Right now, H-1B visas are awarded in a totally random lottery, and that's wrong. Instead, they should be given to the most skilled and highest paid applicants, and they should never, ever be used to replace Americans. No one can compete with American workers when they are given a fair and level playing field, which has not happened for decades.
Now, Trump has signed an executive order to review H-1B visa programs to favor more skilled and highly paid applicants. And as we've been reporting, 85,000 visas are issued under the program. But demand is white hot. Last year, the program filled its quota for applicants in less than a week. The biggest recipients are Indian outsourcing firms like Infosys and Tata Consultancy. Now, Mike Dorning covers the White House for Bloomberg News and joins us from Washington. Thanks for giving your time today, Mike. And this does seem to be aimed squarely at the outsourcing companies. He even went on to mention them, some of the background reports to this.
Well, indeed. One of the administration officials who helped design this specifically named 3 outsourcing companies that he thought would be hardest hit by this. And the whole idea is to shift those H-1B visas away from sort of lower skill, less well-paid jobs to jobs that really are high skill and that you couldn't find an American worker.
And Mike, what's interesting is actually it seems the White House is asking for the help from certain agencies for their ideas of how they can make this more targeted.
Yes, this executive order really doesn't order them to do anything. All it does is start in process what any large organization would do, which is say, hey, we have this goal. What are some good ideas on how to achieve this? So this is something that will probably take months, probably not until next year till you see any impact on this.
And what about, therefore, the H-1B in terms of how much the executive can drive forward changes, or how much still we're seeing the White House being held to account by Congress? Because they are going to weigh in at some point, are they?
There are bills before Congress, as you know, that would just get rid of the lottery system and switch to a different system for allocating H-1B visas. And some of the experts we talked to weren't quite certain how much authority the executive branch might have to just completely move away from the lottery system, which the Trump administration would like to do. But even if they can't do that, they can probably come up with ways to change the rules of the lottery so that it can favor more highly skilled, more highly paid positions. And that's where they're kind of asking for ideas at the moment from the agencies who actually carry that out.
Agencies being asked for ideas, of course, it'd be interesting to see if Silicon Valley is asked for ideas, because this does also affect some of the juggernauts based here, Microsoft, Facebook, the like. Do you think that there will be some discussion going on with the technology community?
I think they don't need to be asked. I think they will provide their ideas.
We'll see whether they do indeed provide that. I'm sure they're very willing and eager to get an ear, to give them their earful. Mike Dorning with Bloomberg News in Washington. Great to put that in perspective. Thank you. Now, coming up, we head live to Facebook's F8 conference. What CEO Mark Zuckerberg has planned for the social media giant? That's next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can now listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the US on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde. And let's get back to our lead. IBM reported earnings after the close. Revenue fell short of projections, in fact, marking a 20th consecutive quarterly decline. Growth in new businesses like cloud services and artificial intelligence failed to make up for the slumping legacy hardware and software sales. IBM has lofty goals for sales in the new businesses, aiming to hit $40 billion by next year. Now, the call is underway now with analysts and investors, and CFO Martin Schroeter says that IBM's first quarter workforce restructuring expenses came to $170 million. CEO Ginni Rometty will not join the call. Now, Facebook's annual developer conference has officially kicked off. In his keynote address, CEO Mark Zuckerberg signaled that a major focus for the company going forward will be augmented reality.
Even if we were a little slow to add cameras to all our apps, I am confident that now we're going to push this augmented reality platform forward. And long term, all the work that we're doing here is going to go into the glasses that we all want. It's all the same technology, and this is another step on the path there.
Joining us with an inside take live from Facebook's F8 Developers Conference in San Jose, California, is Bloomberg Technology's Sarah Fryer. A rather relaxed-looking Mark Zuckerberg on stage today. What were your key takeaways, do you think, in terms of the push? It seems to be take that Snapchat.
Well, it was really interesting. Snapchat this morning announced that they'd start doing this 3D overlay on the real world just in time, because Facebook comes out at their big developer conference of the year and basically says that this strategy that Snapchat has brought to the fore, we're going to win at it. So Zuckerberg's very confident that, despite the slow start, as he said in that quote you pulled, they are going to be the ones that are going to get people used to augmented reality, first through their phones and then through some sort of device.
Of course, they made a big push into virtual reality with the purchase of Oculus, many questioning perhaps the price point they paid for it. But they're not giving up on VR either. There seems to be a new focus on the so-called spaces they launched today.
Absolutely. I mean, VR has become this incredibly crowded market. And for Facebook to look at this market and say, look, what can we really own? It's the social communication, the social software that helps people, really build their relationships like they do on the main app. So what they announced today was this thing called Spaces, where you can create this VR avatar, and then you can hang out with your friends and family in this avatar world.
I mean, plenty of energy clearly going on at F8 from the speakers, from the developers in the crowd, but there was also a more personal and perhaps more awareness note that was made by Mark Zuckerberg, of course, noting that there had been this tragic occurrence over the Easter weekend in Cleveland. A murder had taken place and it had been sadly broadcast on Facebook. We can just have a listen to what Mark Zuckerberg said earlier.
Our hearts go out to the family and friends of Robert Godwin Sr. And we have a lot of work, and we will keep doing all we can to prevent tragedies like this from happening.
Sarah, are you surprised he took to the floor and mentioned this, or did he have to?
I think his word choice is very interesting. Prevent tragedies like this from occurring. What's the tragedy? Is it that this murder went viral? This is something that's going to be tricky for Facebook to navigate in the future. They currently rely so heavily on humans to flag stuff when it's something that needs to be taken down, and they, once this was flagged, they got it down in 23 minutes, they say. But that's not fast enough. The internet moves even faster. And so what they need to do, Zuckerberg says, and others today have echoed this, is use artificial intelligence to be able to determine that these videos are inappropriate for the platform much earlier on.
Plenty of challenges, but still opportunities ahead, it would seem. Bloomberg Technology's Sarah Fryer, fantastic reporting throughout the day from F8 for us. And sticking with Facebook, there was also news on the company's Messenger platform. Facebook announced new features in an effort to make its users' primary messaging app. We caught up with David Marcus, that's Facebook's Vice President of Messaging Products, and I started by asking about his goals to make Messenger, well, a one-stop shop for users.
It all depends what you're trying to do, but there are lots of things that belong in a conversational context. And when you think about a messaging app, and Messenger particularly, it's the place you go to coordinate plans, whether it's making reservations at a restaurant, building a playlist with your friends, or many, many other things that require some form of conversation and coordination. So now, instead of app switching to other apps and bringing that content in complex sharing flows, you can do it right there and then inside of Messenger natively. So it's just easier for everyone to do the things they're already doing.
So therefore, no app switching, keeping within Messenger and using bots. This is a way that you want to see companies interacting with people, people interacting with companies more. There was a lot of hype when we heard this announcement of bots in Messenger in 2016. Can it live up to the hype in 2017?
Well, I think, every new technology has a hype cycle when it lives on a platform that's as large as ours. And I feel that we've made a ton of progress in the last 12 months. We now have over 100,000 active bots, up from 33,000 last September. We have 65 million businesses on Facebook and pages, of which 20 million respond to messages on Messenger every month and provide customer service in a much better way than they could over the phone. So things are happening, and they're happening because we opened a platform, because we've learned a lot, and because we've built a very successful developer ecosystem around the product, Messenger, that now has over 1.2 billion people using it every month.
And of course, for those viewers out there, internet bots being a way of having applications run very swiftly as a piece of software. Give us, therefore, the monetization strategy of Messenger, David. Where are we going to see adverts coming up? How are businesses going to be using this and paying you?
Well, the way we're thinking about monetization for Messenger is that if we create more value inside of conversations in Messenger for businesses, then they want to create more of these. And a great way to do this right now is to buy ads and newsfeed in the main Facebook product that open conversations inside of Messenger. And, that's the very first step. It's creating and generating a new type of demand for newsfeed ads. And gradually over time, we'll test ways for companies to advertise inside of Messenger in a tasteful way that doesn't get in the way of messaging, because that's what people come to Messenger for.
So how big a part of Facebook's overall revenue do you see Messenger being? Do you have a target? Do you have a utopia?
No, we don't break that out. It's very early, as you can imagine, because like buying ads in newsfeed that point to Messenger is only something that any of the companies that have built a presence on the platform could start doing since last December at 100%. So it's very early still, and so it's very small. But we think that with a user base, that's what it is, and with a thriving ecosystem that gets more value from the platform, that over the long run will be able to build a solid business.
I want to ask you, of course, many feel that F8 has really been Facebook showing how they can overtake Snapchat. Do you agree? Are you really taking aim at what Snap has been doing?
Well, I think, if you look at the Stories format, it's a format that was built and invented, and, now it's a standard that's available in a number of apps because it does fit in a number of apps. And when it comes to messaging, posting something on your day actually helps build context for better conversations, or it enables you to share, plans. And, for instance, if you want to send a quick photo, who's up for coffee, and broadcast it to all of your friends, Messenger is a great place to do that because responses will get to you privately instead of publicly. So we feel that this is a product that is actually adding a lot of utility across our platforms, and we'll continue investing in it.
That was Facebook Vice President of Messaging Products, David Marcus. And another Bloomberg scoop for you now. Verizon is open to a merger. Now, that's according to CEO Lowell McAdam. The largest U.S. wireless carrier could consider a deal with Comcast, CBS or Disney as telecom and media industries increasingly converge. Verizon has struggled with a mature and ultra-competitive consumer business and has had difficulty establishing itself in mobile media and advertising ventures. Now coming up, former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer gives us details on his new venture, aiming to make government data more accessible. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Now, Google has unveiled some big upgrades to Google Earth. The redesign adds new features like 3D maps of specific locations and interactive guided tours. The tours are led by scientists, documentarians, and other experts helping users learn about our world. Google says more than 50 tours are available under the service's new Voyager section. This version of Google Earth is now available in Chrome or on Android and will be coming to iOS in the future. Now, former Microsoft CEO and current LA Clippers owner Steve Ballmer believes in data. He believes in it so much that he's launched a comprehensive data-driven look at government spending. It's called USA Facts. Earlier, Bloomberg's David Gura met Ballmer and asked him if measuring productivity in tech has gotten any easier. Take a listen.
Measuring productivity is a weird concept to me. Measuring how people live, how they eat, what their housing looks like, how much money they have to spend on those things, that looks clear to me. Obviously, we all like having cell phones. It has changed lives. It has made things very different. And yet it doesn't show up in a particular way in some of the GDP and productivity numbers. To me, that may not be the most important point relative to what we are trying to do with USA Facts. We have GDP, we have all the numbers out there, but I'm not sure it really captures the citizen's experience and never will capture the citizen's experience.
Let me just dig in a little bit here on the more micro level. When you look at tech, is that sector more exclusively here, you look at the sharing economy. It's one that is hugely popular. More and more people are becoming part of it, yet it's not making a ton of money. As you're looking at the data on that particular segment of the tech economy, what do you make of that? Is that just something we have to take as it is for the time being?
Well, we don't have data that relates specifically to the topic. My own sense is that tech is enabling people to do new things in cheaper ways, and that's all positive for quality of life. Whether we'll ever capture that precisely in our data, who knows? But I'm a big fan of tech. I was in the tech industry for a long time, and I see a lot of potential for tech to continue to positively transform people's lives.
Let me ask you about the news of the day. President Trump traveling to Wisconsin today. What's your message to him about how immigration has fueled the tech sector over these last few decades? And are you with him that that system needs to be reformed?
Well, as CEO of Microsoft, certainly I appreciated the value of people who were not U.S. citizens and the impact they could make, particularly in these very high-skilled engineering jobs. So I'll stand by what I've said. When I look at the broader set of numbers, the total number of people who come to the United States under H-1B visas is about 165,000 a year. Relative to all people coming under visas to the U.S., it is a relatively small number by percentage. I think it's 2+ million come overall and 165,000 come on tech. If you look at where the H-1B visas are used, some of it is going into companies like Google and Microsoft, but some of it is just going into outsourcing jobs, people who are the front end to outsourcers, for example, in India. So I think it's a much broader and more complicated question, but on a relatively small base of numbers. If you add up all the H-1B visas, new visas that go to people at Microsoft, Google, Facebook, blah, 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 I think it is not a dramatically high percentage of the workforce per year.
I've read that you have an Amazon Echo. You're a fan of the device. You look at Amazon, a huge company, hugely successful company. What does an upstart tech company do in the face of a behemoth like that one? Or what might an upstart have done in the face of a big behemoth like Microsoft a few years back? What's the best route to compete with a company like that?
Well, I think the key is to find a place where you have a unique concept, product concept, and understand how it'll fit the user, and try not to be in a place where the behemoth can logically and easily go. You don't want to essentially be building something that would better be done as a feature of the market leader, if you will, as opposed to an entirely new product, unless you're interested in having your product acquired, or your company acquired by the behemoth. And so if you take a look at how Amazon got going or how Facebook got going, these companies got going in the context of behemoths, but they had a very unique product concept. They jumped on it quickly. They drove it to critical mass. And by the time that happened, it was far enough away that the behemoths, Microsoft or Apple or Google in the case of social, people weren't responding fast enough, and these new behemoths can grow up.
I know that you're a Ford loyalist. Your dad worked for Ford. You drive Ford cars. And we've seen Mark Fields, the CEO of that company, going back and forth to Washington an awful lot. We have a president now who's seemingly interested in more interface with executives. Is that a good thing? And what's the role of government in encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship?
Well, at the end of the day, I think business has to take care of itself when it comes to innovation. Not that I either like or don't like a role for government, but it's the creativity of people in business that's going to really lead to these innovations. And, you know, business execs can give input on tax policy and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, I think the #1 drivers will actually be what the businesses do that are largely independent of government impact.
That was, of course, former Microsoft CEO and now current LA Clippers owner Steve Ballmer. Now, coming up, a bevy of tech companies are heading to the Silver State. We dig into the tech land grab in Nevada. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Now, Tesla's Gigafactory is about to have a new neighbor, Google. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Silicon Valley giant bought land in Nevada stretching across over 1,200 acres. Alphabet might build a massive data center on the vacant desert tract, but there's also some speculation that the land could also be used for testing self-driving cars at higher speeds. Joining us to discuss is Bloomberg technology editor Alistair Barr. And, well, who knew that this was such a hot place to be building out your technology companies? But talk to us first about the data center element of this, because this wouldn't be such a new area of growth for Google.
Yeah, that's right. Google probably opens a data center every 1 or 2 months, and they're always buying land kind of ahead of time. That was a very common practice a year or two ago, and they spend billions of dollars a year on that type of thing. And probably having a data center up in Reno, that might be a good area. It's quite kind of like a high desert, so sometimes it's hot, but in the winter it might be quite cool. So you might be able to cool the data center pretty well there. Then you have, obviously, as you've mentioned, Tesla nearby, so there might be other things going on there too.
Yeah, so of course, Google, the cloud part of the business, they think could eventually be bigger than the whole search part of the business. So it's clearly an area of growth, but so too was the area they spun out, Waymo, autonomous driving. And this is also something many are wondering why Uber's looking at Nevada. Nevada seems to be ahead of the game, pushing some of the the laws and regulations to be approving of all of this?
Yeah, so California, everyone thinks California is kind of the place where self-driving cars happen and are tested, but actually Nevada passed, I think it was the first self-driving car law, and actually a guy who we've spoken about before, Anthony Lewandowski, who's at Uber now, he actually had Nevada write a self-driving car law so he could go and test cars. This was years ago. So it has a reputation for pushing the envelope on that and being more lax than California. So yeah, there's loads of space out there for Google, so they could easily test their cars out there in the desert.
And we've also got to look to Tesla out there and Gigafactory aplenty, maybe a push towards battery and clean energy. Is that an area that Google's been eyeing up in particular? Well,
Larry Page, Alphabet founder, Google founder, he he's very close to Elon Musk, and Ashley Vance has written about this a lot. He said that basically he might give a lot of his fortune to Elon Musk if he was going to give it to anyone. So he's highly supportive, and I think if Tesla needed anything, Alphabet might invest, or he would support it. So that they're very, very close for sure.
Fascinating. Well, we'll see how that 1,200 acres is put to work. I want to go down there and start seeing how they're all jostling for space. I think eBay's there as well, and Walmart. So land grabs is on. Thank you very much indeed, Alistair Barr, as ever, Bloomberg technology editor, joining us there. Now, that does it for this particular edition of Bloomberg Technology. Remember, all episodes are now live streaming on Twitter. Check us out. It's at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. right here in San Francisco. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.